Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Red, The Journey. I'm your host, Dee Lewis.
I'm Brittany.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Quintana.
And we welcome you in. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast today. And I hope that you've definitely been keeping up with what the Journey ladies are talking about and what we're doing. Thank you to our podcast director, Mr. Dion Jones,
Yay!
who is setting us up and helping us with this podcast a lot. And we are so gracious for him. Ladies, today we're going to talk about something that most people will go, what? Is there such a thing as respectable sins?
Or
Acceptable sins?
Acceptable sins, respectable sins.
Is there such a thing?
Is there such a thing as respectable sins?
Respectable? Maybe not, but acceptable ones, yes.
Well, maybe acceptable sins can be respectable.
Actually, Jerry Bridges wrote a book called Respectable Sins. And we just
Interesting.
kind of talked about it from an acceptable standpoint. But the book is called, and I think you guys should get it because it's really going to be an eye-opener. It was for us when we were doing our Thursday togetherness classes.
The link to the book will be in the bio.
Yes, absolutely. Called Respectable Sins by Jerry Bridges. So basically, what do we mean when we talk about respectable sins? Because sin is sin in God's eyesight. There is no good sin. It's all bad. So why do we refer to it as being respectable or acceptable? What is it that causes us to say that? It's ones that we often tolerate. It's ones that we find acceptable, so to speak, and we tolerate them without even being aware.
Or feel like nothing's wrong
Or
with them.
feel like it's nothing wrong with them.
Like a little white lie.
Exactly. Ding, ding, ding. You got it. The little white lie.
Yeah.
When in actuality, a lie is
It's a lie.
A lie. You know, you've heard the saying, you telling a bold-faced lie?
Yes.
Well, for a long time, I thought it was a bald-faced lie.
And you would say it. And you would say it.
But it was actually bold-faced, like you bold-face something in writing. You know, the bold in Microsoft Word or whatever. But yeah, the little white lie, that is considered an acceptable sin. They're very subtle. They're subtle sins that we often do not give much thought to. It's something that's in our unconsciousness, an unconscious awareness of them. But these small sins can lead to much bigger sins or more serious ones, such as lust can lead to a porn addiction. We may not think lust for ourselves is a big deal, but then it opens the door to something else, and then it's something else, and before you know it, you done fell into bed in adultery.
Oh, Jesus.
Not fell in the bed.
She said, fell in the bed.
How does that happen?
Just slipped and fall.
You tripped in the bed.
Oh, but you know, something like that. So when we talk about, in looking at this book by Jerry Bridges when he wrote this, for a long time I was like, oh, I'll read it later. And then one week, the Holy Spirit told me, pick that book up and y'all come together on Thursdays and talk about acceptable sins. And I'm like, we ain't got no acceptable sins. We Holy Ghost filled women. Fire baptized. We ain't got no acceptable sins. But what happened when we came together?
We had a whole bunch of acceptable. It was like, ooh, Lord.
Ooh, it was rough. It was so rough. I'm gonna tell you what. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So some of the examples, the little white lie is one of them. But you never think about anxiety and frustration as being a sin.
Right.
And that was all over my toes. I'm like,
Mine too. Ooh,
we-
mine too.
How about discontentment? Just being in a state of discontentment, just unhappy.
Negative Nancy's.
Negative Nancy's.
Toxic people.
How about ungratefulness?
Mm.
Just being ungrateful for what we do
Right.
have. That is something that is a sin, but we tend to accept it.
Go
This
to the
one.
big one. That's a big one right there.
Right.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Moral self-righteousness, pride, and that is huge.
Right.
That's an umbrella that's huge. A lot of people say they don't have any pride, but yet they have a very independent spirit.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Independent. Don't need nobody's help.
I'll just do it myself.
I'll just do
Right.
it myself.
Because can't nobody do it right.
So can't nobody do it. That's right. That's right. How about pride of achievement? The doctorates and
Right.
the bachelors and the masters, and I did this on my own.
Yeah. And recognizing that nothing's wrong with those things in general.
In
But
and
when
of
you-
itself.
When you allow that to become your identity.
Yes.
Or it
Right.
allows you to allow yourself to be puffed up.
Ooh,
Yeah.
puffed up.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to be puffed up. I mean, I always thought, Lord, I felt bad because I didn't have all these alphabets after my name. And it always made me feel inadequate when I was around men and women of God that had a lot of alphabets after their name. Until one pastor told me, he said, D. Lewis, it's the reason why God didn't give you alphabets after your name. He said, you'd have been too smart for your own good. And I was like, you know what, Pastor, you probably right. He said, yeah. He said, so whatever you need, God will give it to you. And he's
Right.
absolutely, God told me, I will teach you what you need to know when you need to know. Just trust me. And
Right.
that's humbling.
Yes.
That kept me in a place of humility, because where I didn't know, I still have to totally rely on God. Like, I'm sitting here doing this podcast with you ladies, and the butterflies in my stomach is just rumbling around and fluttering around. And I get nervous, and I'm like, what am I going to say? And sometimes when I'm talking, it just seems like I'm rambling on. And Heather would probably say, Mom, you are. But anyway,
She just got the gift of gab, is what they
that
call
is
it.
my gift, and I just did not, I don't sew, I don't cook, I don't have any arts and crafts like my BFF does. She can create something on the fly like that, All of you all have gifts that you can show people. I have to speak and talk. And
That is your gift.
That's my gift, and I have to accept that. I didn't accept it for a long time. How about selfishness?
Ouch.
You're not selfish.
Yeah.
I am about certain things with regards
Yeah.
to certain things.
I was just going to say, if you'll read those.
Our interest, our time, our money, inconsiderateness, selfishness, our
Yeah.
interest, our time.
Our time.
Now, I would say I've become a little bit acceptable with my time. I've had to be. Look,
There's a balance. There's a balance.
Yeah, I've had to be.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, if you clear something off of your schedule, trust me, somebody else is going to put
Right.
something on it.
Right.
So we have to have these boundaries. We have to. Lack of self-control in eating. Oh, when we got to that.
My goodness.
Lack of self-control is an acceptable sin in eating, drinking, our temperament, personal finance. Lack of self-control in TV, hobbies. How about impulse buying? Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Lack of self-control. Impatient and irritability.
Ouch.
See, we didn't really realize this
Yeah.
until we started tossing
Yeah,
these things
yeah.
out. We didn't see these as acceptable sins.
And we were
that
like,
accept.
that's me, that's me, that's
Right.
me, that's me, that's me.
Check.
We were like, oh man,
Now-
we got a lot to work on.
Here's something that we all automatically said: anger
Mm-hmm.
can be a sin if it's not handled properly. And we
Right.
talk about that with Journey,
Mm-hmm.
that anger is one letter away from danger
Right.
if it's not handled properly. And it's okay to be angry, but
Sin.
sin not.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to control that anger. And weeds of anger could be like resentment and bitterness and enmity and hostility, holding grudges,
Mm.
strife.
Right.
All of that, those are weeds of anger. Judgmentalism, being judgmental towards other people. It's something that we know that the Bible tells us what? To not
Judge not, just
judge
like he
not.
judged.
Mhm. With the same judgment that you mete out to somebody else, it's going to come back to you. So we got to make sure that, and these are the ones that we was like, oh yeah, that's a big deal. Envy and jealousy, and there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Competitiveness. It's okay to be competitive, but not to a fault. To where you say you coach a little league,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and you've seen some of these coaches with these kids on the field.
Even
And
these parents.
Even these parents coming out to stands, fighting on the field with each other and carrying on. And these are little league. And what are we teaching the kids? That spirit of competitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what we need to do is when our kids come home from school and they have a report card and they have these grades on there and they may not be acceptable to us, but we ask our child, honestly, did you do your best? And if that D is your child's best, truly, honestly, their best, then that's okay.
Right.
Now, it may be that you could help them with some tutoring or some, extra work or something going on to help to make sure they understand. But if your child is a BC student and you're forcing them to be an A student when you know their best is a BC student, this is just an example. That's a spirit of competitiveness, okay? Always ask, did you do your best? And I've learned that, and I asked my youngest daughter when she brings home those grades from Liberty, and I'm looking, I'm like, Mom, I did my best. Honestly, I did my best.
And I could see her saying,
Yeah, Mama, I did my best. I'm like, okay, but I never saw you at the table doing your best.
Your best practice.
Your best practice.
Best practice.
Ooh, how about this? Sins of the tongue. Ooh, what's something that could be sins of the tongue, Heather?
Cursing.
Ooh,
ooh,
slander,
gossip.
gossip, lying, flat out telling a bold-faced lie. Harsh words doesn't necessarily have to be profanity. Sarcasm, insults, ridicule. All those things are sins of this little member in our mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have worldliness. Worldly mindedness over money, immorality, idolatry. Anything that is in the number one slot in our life is idolatry. And that could be anything to anybody.
It causes obsession.
Yes, it does. This is a list of just a few of the sins that we find acceptable or respectable, that we really don't think about. When you think about, and this number one, we talked about ungodliness, and I said, now wait a minute, I am not an ungodly person. But some of our ways, some of my ways, I can talk about myself, potentially could be ungodly in the way I behaved. For example, if I didn't get up out the bed in time to get dressed and get ready for work, and now I'm running late, and this little old man in front of me is putting along, and I can't get over, and I'm plying my brakes, and I'm acting in an ungodly fashion, bumping the horn, and Heather, Heather go like this, I was like, Heather, stop that. People looking at you. Yeah, I know, they need to get out of the way.
Because another acceptable sin is slipping in frustration.
Yes.
I mean, road rage.
Anxiety and frustration.
Road rage is a thing.
But
It is.
my behavior
My mom has it.
is considered
Look, that's that anger
ungodliness.
towards others.
Yes.
It is.
How about being angry towards God? People don't want to admit that,
Yeah.
but we have a lot of Christian folk that are angry towards God.
Right.
But I think that's a mark of real, true relationship when you can go to God and say, okay, God, I know I shouldn't be angry, but I am. And
Right.
this is why. That's just like a
That's
parent.
relationship.
That's just
Right.
like a parent. If a parent does something wrong and you're mad or you're frustrated with that parent, when you can go and you can talk to them and you can talk through it and resolve it or bring resolve and then have an understanding, then that's
Right.
the mark of a true relationship.
True,
Right.
absolutely. But if you're angry towards God because He didn't do what you wanted Him to do when you wanted Him to do it, now you got some pride,
Right.
selfishness,
Right.
pride in there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or some bitter and resentment in there,
Yeah.
some weeds of
Weeds.
anger.
Did you say some weeds?
That's
We
some
got some
weeds
weeds
of
in
anger.
there.
Some weeds.
You got some
We
herb
gotta
in there.
pull them weeds up.
You gotta pull up them weeds.
But I find that a lot of these acceptable sins people will use as an excuse to
Right.
say that this is just who they are.
That, oh my goodness,
They
that's
try to
true.
make it a form of
That is
identity.
true.
Yeah.
That is good.
And that's
true.
what I think about what I said. I was like, okay, how we went down the list once we were going
Yes.
through. We were like, oh, that's me, but we don't
Right.
need to
But
take that identity
initially,
on.
Yeah.
we didn't think
Yeah.
we had any issues
Yeah.
coming into this
Right.
thing. But once I started reading that book, I was like, ooh, that's me? Oh, Lord, I got to work on that. Oh, help me, Jesus. Oh.
Just give me the whole list.
Just give me But what this book, and I believe the reason why Jerry Bridges wrote it, was to bring to our attention the things that God sees. And He says, that is sin before me.
Yeah.
And we just saying, like Heather said, well, that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
My mama was like it. My grandma was like that.
Then that's a generational curse.
Ooh, you had
Yes,
something
it
about
is.
that. How we could tie this in, too.
Yes. So we were talking about acceptable sins, and then in our last segment we were talking about like the yokes of bondage. And so I recognized for myself that I think a door that was open in the home by a guardian when I was younger led to, and I think already mixed with a young girl, I think I was maybe middle school, high school, growing, developing, I already was starting to kind of operate in some of these acceptable sins. I would definitely say like pride and selfishness, which I think the selfishness then led to a lack of self-control. Because it was about me, what I wanted to do, how I felt, what I thought, me.
Right.
And some of that was just growing up being an only child.
Right.
So it was, most of the time it was just about me. So, I had to learn how to, recognize that and really not operate in that way. But one thing, and I know, Heather, you would probably get a laugh out of this, because this will take us back, after school, you're in middle school, high school, after school you come home, what do? You put your book bag down, turn on the TV, you got your show, you know what time it comes on, you get your little snack. And so I found myself, probably in high school, like in this routine of, I would get home, you know, maybe nobody else was there. I'd go in, get my snack, you know, sit down, watch my show, and then one show started becoming my like afternoon go-to, the Maury show. And it was like, what were they always doing?
Arguing,
Right.
fussing.
Who's the daddy? You know, and somebody is crying, running to the back. You are not the father.
You are not the father.
Yeah, you know, and that was just like, but I didn't realize it back then. But those were seeds that were being sown into my life. And so, of course, now as an adult, a mature, and a believer, I have been very mindful through the years of what goes into myself and my daughter.
Right.
What we see, what we hear, you know, even what we're saying. If I hear something, then I'm like, okay, what you been watching? You know, what have you been listening to? But I didn't realize it back then, like that repeated day after day of just sitting down,
Right.
taking
Yes,
all
yes,
that,
yes,
taking
yes.
it in, taking it in, taking it in, and she crying and she fussing and she fighting the girl, and you know, you're running over here and pulling hair, and you know, just all that confusion and frustration really sowed some seeds. So first it was the open door in the household through the guardians, and then it was me allowing acceptable sins of pride, selfishness, and then lack of self-control with what I allowed to come in. And so my senior year of high school, I found myself in that position,
Oh, wow.
in that exact position.
That
I
daggone
had
Maury Povich.
99.999%. You are not the father. But I found myself my senior year of high school after graduating. I was pregnant, had put myself in a situation, I didn't know who did, you know, and I honestly think that some of that was that I had taken in so much, and then I took on that mindset of, oh, I don't know who it is. And it's like, okay, no, you know who the daddy is, stop playing. But yeah, and so then that created really a ripple effect because, you know, then I'm a single mom and I'm going through this, and then I have all these little dramas I'm going through and dealing with the baby daddy, and then he cheating and running off, and you know, and it was just like a repeat. It was just like I was playing out in some ways.
Wow.
The
that's
very
a
thing
great
that I
example.
saw, and so it really took just being matured in the Word, my relationship with God, to where I could really say, okay, hey, the buck stops here. And I'm not repeating these things. I'm not living out these things. I'm not, you know, so when it came down to, you know, money, in the initial beginning, it would be, okay, you know, child support. You need support for the child.
Right.
And then I went into years and I was like, I'm not arguing about money. And I just stopped. I stopped asking about money. I stopped arguing about I didn't say anything. And so that was one of the safeguards, you know, that I realized in how I matured and grew up and just kind of cut that off. But I just saw that relation to how, you know, you have the generational curses that then if you don't cover your family and bring those things in and cut them off, then you can have open doors.
Yes.
And then those open doors can lead to your acceptable sins, and you can have your yoke of bondage from your acceptable sins, which then can create a generational curse all over again.
I think you just dropped the mic on that. She done put it all together and summed it all up and put the bow on it. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But I think the
you got
blessing
that.
of that has been how I've been able to show. So my daughter now lives, even whether she wants to admit it or not, sometimes she does or doesn't, but most of the time she'll come back to me if she, you know, if something is off and she's able to tie in and see, okay, Mom, you know, maybe I thought this girl was my friend, but I listened. I heard, I saw, you know, or she's listening or someone else is listening to something and she hears the words and she's like, oh, that's not right. You know, so I'm thankful that now, you know, she's got that, she's growing, but she's got that sense of she's sensitive to sound. She's sensitive to, you know, what's seen. She's sensitive to those things.
Right.
And aware.
Yes. And I think, Heather, that's one of the reasons why I was so overbearing with you and very protective of you, is because I didn't want you to travel in the footsteps of other people, because that generational curse was there in your bloodline. And I was just determined that no, you're not going that route. And she was, you know, pulling and tugging in the opposite direction, and I'm like, no, you're not doing that. And you know, and I just that ties into that, where I was not going to allow that door.
I mean, it was like a filter of music and TV and places I would go and people I would hang out with, and I never understood, but I mean, what child really does at the time.
Right.
It's like, you know, I never understood why I was so sheltered and why I couldn't go do these things or see these things or hear these things. And now that I'm an adult and I have my own child, you know, I can, you know, honestly say, like, I understand a lot of, you know, why you did what you did, and especially in my growth with my walk with God, it's like I get it. Do I always do it right? No. There's still some things that I probably shouldn't be listening to and things like that. But just with my own kid, you know, he's saying the exact same thing. Like, you need to lighten up. You're so overbearing and protective, and it's okay. And I'm like, no, it's really not. Like, you
Say what?
Yeah, it's like, no, you really should not be, you know, listening to these things and playing these certain games, and, you know, because it gets into your spirit and you start to react and you start to live these things out. And so I do get that now, you know, now that I'm an adult.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And what we're saying is that these, what we call acceptable sins, aren't acceptable to God.
Right.
They're acceptable to us because we look at it, well, at least I'm not, you know, committing fornication, I'm not committing adultery, I'm not drinking alcohol, I'm not smoking pot. And so we look at these, what we consider sins in the church, as being okay, but then we kind of look at this list that we just went down as being, you know, not so bad.
And just listening to Brittany tell her story, and Dion, you might want to cover your ears, but just listening to Brittany tying in the yokes of bondage and strongholds, and me just looking at this list, it reminded me of my problems, because I had sex addiction. I can't even get the word out anymore.
He has
addiction problems.
He has cleansed your tongue.
Right, I can't even get it out.
He has cleansed your tongue.
And so let's just talk about this thing, because masturbation is a selfishness. It's a selfishness act.
Yeah.
I had a lack of self-control that led me to pornography, that led me to having adult relationships with married men, with men in general. It led me to have worldliness, because that was immorality. So just thinking about these acceptable sins and going down the list and acts and things that I've done in my life, and how they led to bigger sins, led to yokes of bondages and strongholds.
Yeah.
So
it's like it compounds.
right.
Sin compounds itself. It just needs a little crack.
Exactly.
And before you know it, you got a Titanic of a situation.
It's like a rock hitting your windshield, and all of a sudden, if you don't tend to it, it grows.
Yeah, spreads.
And it all starts with an inner desire to fulfill ourselves.
Right.
That's what we're basically looking at.
Right.
It's that desire for fulfillment.
Right.
It makes me
inside.
think about how, like, when, you know, there were just different times, different accounts in the Bible, it's like, okay, not my will, but yours be done. It makes it seem almost like, okay, those were moments where that selfishness, that doing the opposite, doing what I want, you know, could have crept up, and just having that confession of, okay, not my will, but yours be done.
And there are really and truly 3 categories where sin will always land.
Yes.
And you guys already know it. It's the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes,
and the pride of life. Right.
Those are the only 3 categories where sin, period, is going to land in one of those 3. It's no other way. It's going to be one of them.
But
Yeah.
it's also like, I look at myself too, like just when I became a young adult and, you know, just kind of piggybacking off what you said about like fulfilling a desire within yourself, it was like, you know, now that I'm old enough and I've been released into the world, it's like I had all these what I thought were empty voids and spots in my life where I had to just fulfill them with the world,
Right.
instead of, you know, filling them with God, because that was my foundation. That's what I
Right.
had growing up,
Same here.
you know. So it was like, it wasn't like I didn't know
Yeah.
to put God in those places, but it was like the desire was so strong from the enemy. It was just like, okay, well, I've had enough church now. I'm going to go out here
Right.
and see what the other side's like and do everything that I thought I was big and bad enough to do. And all of those acceptable sins started compounding, like we said, and then
Right.
getting bigger. And along with that comes consequences.
Right.
Yes.
And so I had to endure a lot of negative consequences behind the choices that I made. And unfortunately, some I still deal with today, consequence-wise, because of the things that I did in my past. But, and I think that's sometimes what people don't realize or they don't think about. Like, if I decide to be, you know, led into this temptation, then on the other side of that, I'm going to have a reaction. I'm going to have a consequence that I'm going to have to deal with.
Right.
And,
That's right.
you know, some people are like, you know, with the little white lie, it's like, oh, it's okay. I can do this one little thing. It's not going to hurt, you know, whatever. I'll be able to go to church on Sunday and get on the altar and it'll all be fine. No, it's like, you have to go through all of that if
Right.
you decide to open that door or step through that door that was open. And, you know, pray that God will let it be His will for you to come out on the other side of
Right.
it, because God will allow things to happen because of our ignorance.
Right.
And so, you know, just, you know, dealing with all of that, it's like I look at myself and I'm just like, dang, Heather, like you really did not have to go down these paths and down these roads. But again, because I felt like I had to fulfill that need, it did end up leaving me still empty and void.
I think it's really like what it boils down to. It's a lie. It's a deception.
It is.
Because like you even think about like Eve, you know, in the beginning, like she was tempted to think that something was being withheld from her, or that she was missing something that she couldn't have, when really she had it all. And that what was being withheld was for her protection.
That's true.
And so I think that's that deception that tries to come in to make us feel like we're missing something, or, you know, we just need one more thing, or, you know, this is better than that. You know.
It's like your friends or whomever you're with will tell you, oh, just come on, it's all right, you know, you'll be fine, you know, whatever. And you allow that lie to be, you know, believed within yourself. And it's
That's
like,
true.
yeah, okay, I'm going to go do it. But
Right.
really, you're just hurting yourself.
But here's the thing, you know, your mom may not know, your pastor may not know, but God knows.
And you know.
And you know.
Right.
Absolutely. And you know. That's right. Exactly. And so there does come a point in time where that sin compounds itself to the point where it becomes visible on you. And you think you hadn't, and you're really not. And we call it getting butt ball naked in the spirit.
Right.
And exposing it and in repentance. Because in actuality, if the pastor has the discernment, because he pastors your life, he's going to already know. He may not say anything, but he's going to already know, you know, he can see it. God reveals it.
Well, that's just like when you look at certain people and you think that they're older than what they really are, but it's the sin in their life or the things that they've done in the past. It literally manifested on the
Right.
outside,
Right.
That's true.
and it ages you.
It always starts in the spirit and then it
Right.
manifests.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is so true. Sin is a spiritual and moral cancer that can spread throughout our entire inner being and contaminate every area of our lives. That's what it's like. A little leaven, what?
Leavens the whole lump.
Yeah.
Just takes a little bit, and the next thing you know, you're like, how in the world did I get way
Right.
over here?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how
Yeah.
subtle it starts off as being with these acceptable sins,
Yeah.
right? That God does not accept. And God is no longer winking at the stuff we do now.
Yeah.
He's no longer doing that. He's like, okay, you're mature. You're off the milk. You're chewing the steak. You're eating the meat of the word. You know better. So now this is where, those consequences come in at.
And just thinking about the show, we laugh because everybody remembers, the Maury show. I think it's
Yeah.
still running today. They still doing paternity tests. 20 years later. 20 years later. You are not the daddy.
You are not the dad.
But, I mean, what would you say to someone who's like, okay, that's too far. Like, a show can't lead me down a road like that, or a show can't cause me to have all of these things you said. And then have my life turn whatever kind of way.
Well, if your testimony, if your evidence that you just stated didn't prove to them how something so innocent as coming home as a elementary kid after school watching the show time and time again, and how that grew and developed to being 18 and pregnant, if that doesn't show them how it can happen, I don't know what else would.
Because that was a seed that was planted. That was an open
Yes.
door.
Absolutely.
And you may not have been aware of it at that time, but it was taking root.
Yeah, and Katana's transparency
Yeah.
with her evidence,
Yeah.
and if people, they say, oh, that ain't gonna happen to me. Okay, it may not happen this particular way,
Yeah.
but keep living, darling. You'll see. My granddaddy used to say, keep living,
Right,
darling.
because I didn't expect to end up getting pregnant and having 2 abortions, not just 1 but 2, because of the result of my acceptable sins and that compounded.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably after I had my daughter, but at one point I was like, why am I always like depressed? I'm like always singing. And then I think just I think as I grew and started to like pray more and really was seeking God more, then things started to really bother me. And so when I would listen to music, you might hear something, oh, it's got a good beat. Oh, that beat is good. And then I'm listening to the words and I'm like, that don't sound right.
Right.
So this is why I'm depressed, because I was listening to Mary J. Blige or somebody and they'd have broke my heart over and over and over again. Okay, why am I dancing to someone broke my heart over and over and over again?
It sent you back.
And then I'm depressed, and my heart keeps
First
getting
thing we
broken.
want to do is put on some Teddy Pendergrass or some Luther Vandross slow songs that we already sang.
It keeps you in that place.
It keeps you in that place.
Yeah.
Why do we want to stay in that place?
So I really got to a really, I would say, really strict part in my life where I was like, no, I'm not listening to any kind of R&B. Like I literally just cut secular music off for a long time, just because I recognize, okay, I am the type of person that and I think that's as well our nature as women. Okay, we reproduce,
Right.
So we take
Yes.
on something, we
Right.
nurture it,
That's
it's a
right.
seed,
That's
and
right.
it grows, and then we produce it.
I have to admit, I'm a vibrant married woman, and as a result of being married, I don't want to listen to Shirley Caesar hold my mule. With my husband.
She said she ready for the mule to be let go.
I want some.
You know what?
Kiki, I want some Luther. I want, you know what I'm saying? Come on now.
Well, how about we just have no music at all?
No. You gotta set the ambiance. But I'm just saying, I put away all of it now.
Well,
there's a time and a place.
That was for me.
No, for you.
Yes, because I was a single mom.
Yeah, but now you mad now.
Yeah, I was a single young mom.
She's mad
and
now.
so, yes. So
You ain't got no Canton spirituals and all that.
No, I really don't listen to music now these days. I really don't listen to music.
I'm just teasing you. I'm just saying, that's my thing.
These days, anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway,
Okay.
yeah. I break it out every now and again. So.
We see.
Absolutely.
We see.
Absolutely.
I don't want to see.
We here.
You married too now.
Yeah, I know.
Married. I was the only single one here.
I know.
We here.
That's the
We here.
truth.
Me and my K-pop shoot.
Your K-pop friends, absolutely. But if you've just joined us and we're about to close out, we're talking about acceptable sin, sins that we don't think there's anything wrong with it, but in actuality, sin is sin, and God will judge that sin if we don't repent of it and correct it and change it. And so now that we've made you aware of it, guess what, guys? You're accountable for that anxiety and frustration and all of that. So I am so glad that we became aware of this. Because I think we checked all the boxes on that list.
But I feel like it makes it that much harder because you're aware. Because now you have to be mindful of the things you say and do and let into your spirit. And whereas before it was like you didn't know, so it was just
I
like
mean, it's growth.
it's
It's a place of growth. And
It is.
maturity.
Yes,
Well,
it is.
and
It
we
is
like this.
growth.
We like it when the light is shed on the darkness.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But
We don't want
again,
no darkness.
it just
No
makes it a little
darkness at
harder.
all.
You're right.
Yeah.
And so now that's when the battle really begins, because your flesh is not going to surrender.
Right.
You're going to have to slap it, rub it down.
Window.
She hit the bell bend the road.
You got to get that anointing all out and put it in the name
And
of
get
Jesus.
that word.
Get that word. You got to put the
Word on it.
Oh my gosh.
You got to put the word on it. That's exactly right. So I hope you all have enjoyed learning about acceptable sins. That's what we call them.
Not so acceptable.
Not so acceptable
Respectable sense.
sins. Respect.
Not so respectable either.
Not so respectable either.
Yeah, not so respectable.
We gotta let it go. But thank you so
Another
very
TKO.
That's her
Oh,
song.
I
That's
love
her
you guys. I love you guys so much. But thank you so very much for joining the journey. And I hope that honestly, through our transparency, that it is helping you as you watch these podcasts. And hopefully one of these days you're going to be doing something and you're going to remember these ladies and say, I remember Brittany when she said such and such, or Heather, or Quintana, or that old lady, Miss D. Yep, absolutely, Miss D. So God bless you guys. I hope you all stay safe, stay well, and until the next Journey podcast, we'll see you soon.